2414 is a podcast about finding hope and common ground through casual conversation. Like the friends on the road in the New Testament, in Luke chapter 24, verse 14, we want to walk away with more understanding that leads to more conversation as the journey continues. Thanks for walking with us.
All right. Back by popular demand. It's another episode of 2414. My name's Dan. That's Shane. That's Brenda, friend of the show. That's my official classification for you, by the way.
Which I actually really like, so I'll take it.
We have other regular listeners, first-time listeners, former listeners. That list is growing. But here we are. We're a podcast about regular life, having conversation about things that matter, that maybe don't matter so much, things that we experience that we don't get to talk about. We are not a show that's trying to stir people up, so we're not taking controversial points of view just to create interest, but talking about things that we experience just for the sake of good conversation. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Glad you're here. We start every episode with highs and lows and the question of the day. And the topic that we're actually going to get to today is sort of helpful context questions, how to have conversations that connect and check in, things that I think we maybe often want or long for, but it's sometimes hard to do if you don't have good rhythms or tools to kickstart a good conversation. But before we get to that, highs, lows, and the question of the day, this is not intended to be controversial or to stir up hateful feedback or to anger, make anybody anxious, but I'm curious, how do you feel and what do you think about the time change? We, depending on when you listen to this, we just changed our clocks. This was the fall back in hour, and there's maybe some strengths and weaknesses to doing that, but I'm just curious your take on it. So Brenda, we'll start with ladies first today. Lows, highs, and how do you feel about changing your clock? You could talk about just this time change or the idea of both of them, or
Okay, we'll see. My lows this week were really just some different aches and pains. I ate something before it cooled down because I'm usually impatient when I'm eating and I just want it.
Burned your mouth?
Yes. So I had like a bump inside of my mouth for a couple of days, so that hurt. But I don't regret it. I couldn't wait for my food. And then just like some back pain. Every once in a while, that kind of flares up if I'm lifting heavy things and moving boxes around. So it goes away after a day or so. So that was a low. A high this last week. So it's weird. My high has to do with traffic. I am kind of grateful for traffic this last week because it made
unpopular opinion of the day.
Because
so far,
it made for a spontaneous date night with Adam. Yeah,
in the car.
No, not in the car, but he was coming home from work and he was stuck in terrible traffic. And so he called me and asked if I was still at work. And if I wanted to just get dinner here in Federal Way, as opposed to fighting through traffic for even longer and getting home grumpier and having to cook that night. So I said, yes, I'd love to get dinner here.
Where'd you go?
So we went to a dim sum place that's just up the street. It's on top of the Domino's, the closest Domino's to us, where we order pizza from all the time. I
would feel intimidated to go into a dim sum place.
It's okay.
I wouldn't know how to order. I feel nervous.
I wouldn't either.
And I think, I guess I would too if it were my very first time. The first time I went with somebody, and so then they were all about ordering just different things, and they're very adventurous with food, so then I could try different things. So I know a couple that I like already, so that makes it easier. But so we went and ate too much food, and it was just unexpected, and I kept smiling the whole night. I'm like, we're going on a date night on a Thursday night.
Thursday. Cool.
Whatever day it was. I think it was Thursday.
Yeah.
So that was my high this last week. Spontaneous date night thanks to traffic. And
how do you feel about the time change?
Yes, how I feel about it. I'm only going to talk about this fall back because it's the best one. I like it.
It's the best day of the year.
Yeah. It's an extra hour of sleep if you actually take advantage of it being an extra hour of sleep and not going to bed an hour later and then end up with the same amount of sleep.
Okay.
So Sunday morning, I actually got here earlier. I got here like 40 minutes earlier and I had more energy. I'm like, I could feel that hour of sleep. It was great. So I'm a fan of fall back.
Okay.
I'm not a fan of spring forward.
My mom used to say it's the worst day of the year. Just like this is the worst day of the year.
Which one, spring forward or both
No,
of
the
them?
spring forward. No, this fall back's the best day of the year.
Yeah.
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 Is it worth it though? Does the best day of the year make up for the worst day of the year?
I would say so. Okay. I think we block out the bad stuff. So I don't even remember spring forward and how I felt that day. I will change my words once that comes around again. But right now, it's worth it. Yeah.
All right. Cool. Shane Welter. Hi.
Hi.
I heard the show went well, by the way.
Yeah. Show went really well.
So opening weekend.
Weekend.
If you're listening to this, as soon as the podcast come out, you can still make it to perhaps tonight or tomorrow matinee, but most likely you missed your chance.
Yeah.
We tried to tell you.
That's true.
All right, Shane, lows, highs, thoughts and feelings about fallback.
Yeah. Okay. So I haven't actually given any thought to it yet whatsoever, even though we just...
I think that's how real life works, Shane.
It is.
Our listeners probably won't be too surprised to hear that most of this isn't scripted. Yeah. we don't put a lot of thought into it.
Reading the teleprompter right over there. No.
we do a dress rehearsal. We go through the whole show, dress rehearsal, then we...
Oh, yeah. This is all scripted. No. Okay. So I'll say... low, I don't know, low, semi-low, I guess. It's just that I feel like I say this every week, but it's just spread thin, not getting a lot of time just to ourselves, and ourselves being my wife, Lauren. It's just, because I just looked back at the calendar, I was like, oh, when was the time we didn't get back like late night and then finally could unwind at 10 p.m. or 11? Like it's just looking like, so it's just very spread thin, just because a lot going on, and Lauren and I are involved with probably too much. But on the flip side of that, I've just been feeling very at peace recently. Like with everything going on, I should be. Sounds weird. I probably should be more stressed than I am.
Well, you look pretty ragged, if that helps.
Thank you. I go for it. It's the style. No, I like with everything going on, like
Brenda glared at me, by the way. If you're only listening, Brenda's like, "You're a mean person." That was
but
the
if
look
people
I got.
were watching, they saw my eyes.
Yeah, I felt it. I wanted you to acknowledge that I
felt the weight of the glare. No.
Sorry, Shane. You got a lot going on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot going on, but also, I'm just strangely at peace about it. I don't know, like if that's divine or I'm just feeling very at peace with things, because like this Sunday was a very full Sunday, a lot of planned, a lot of moving pieces and everything. And given the circumstances, I know like in the past I was very stressed and whatnot about it, but I was just very at peace when even things went wrong. I was just like, yeah, but it is like, things are the way they are, and like I don't know, having just that kind of that mentality at the time, I guess, and so just very calm, I guess.
That's awesome. Do you think Lauren is in a similar spot to you?
I think so. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mean, given everything that's going on, I think we're fine. I mean, there are times we definitely feel more pressure, and probably, I don't know, certain situations, like we're, I don't know, driving in traffic and it's stressful, that kind of stuff. But like, given everything that's going on and what we're doing, just very grateful for a lot of it. Just the opportunity to like perform for the musical, opportunity to play music, and just all of that. Like, just feel very, I don't know, at peace of things. But given that, I'm also looking forward to things calming down a bit and just having that good chunk of free time back in the schedule.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of just a weird, vague where I'm at, highs and lows, I guess, of that.
I think I really appreciate that. Going back to what you said at the very beginning of you didn't put a lot of thought in this. I'm like, yeah, that's life. And I think it's okay and can be helpful to have really concrete, definite highs and lows. And other times it's just a vibe or a feeling or kind of where you're at. And I think that's super real life.
Oh, I also thought of another high.
I was really stalling so you could come up with something more
Thank
substantive.
you. Yep. None of that doesn't matter
Yeah, it's
anymore. I was lying. No, I'm kidding.
That was
Here's
just
the real
filler.
high.
That was just filler. We'll
was
edit
just
that out
filler.
later. Yeah.
Phew. No, I did mean that. But this with some prize money I won from a sweepstakes
Yep.
a while back, I was debating on what to use it with because I told myself I was not going to use it for adult. Like I'm not going to use it to pay off anything. Like I want to use it for something fun.
Okay.
And so my choices in my head were a guitar pedal,
Okay.
or a new Xbox Series X. And I weighed the pros and cons, and I finally went with the new Xbox. So
Okay.
which is in very high demand, and it's crazy to try to find one. So finally found one.
Series X.
Bought it. Yes.
Okay.
But yeah, finally found one, bought it, and I've just been very giddy since getting that. I don't know if that ties into me being at peace. Probably not, but because I haven't had actually a good chunk of time to play it and appreciate it yet that I've got it. But I'm just happy because I like it. One of the big weights for me is like I need something to help me unwind and to
Yeah.
separate me from other things. So that's why I got it.
So that reminds me of PlayStation a little bit. I have a PlayStation 4 that was gifted to me, and my brothers that I play with have a PlayStation 5, and apparently those aren't all that compatible. And so mine is old enough now that new games that come out, they have to have sort of like cross-platform compatibility to play together, and not every game does. So when the new hockey game comes out, my brothers and I, who were playing on Friday, and we got our headphones on, we're talking and playing. It's sort of the question is, well, you know, since Dan doesn't have the PlayStation 5, I guess we could buy the lesser version of the game so that we could play with him.
Oh no!
Or, you know, but then,
One of us has to.
you know, maybe somebody could catch up to times, but it's the same supply thing. If they're not available,
It's
even
not
if I
available,
had
and
the
it's
money,
also
yeah.
a big investment.
Yeah.
They're not cheap.
Even if I had the money, they're not available, and so I'm like the anchor slowing down my brother's gaming skills. Brenda, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, Shane, you would laugh at me because I have an Xbox 360 that my mom gave me years ago for Christmas. For some reason, she thought I wanted this gaming system. And I have used it 2 or 3 times as a DVD player, and only
That's
that.
amazing.
And so I still have it, and it's still basically brand new. So,
Wow.
yep.
Someday you'll dust it off and say, and you
Find a
get
game.
invested in it. Yeah.
Yeah, someday.
You and Adam will really connect at that point. Like,
Yes.
we've been missing out on this our whole marriage.
Maybe so.
Or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shane, how do you feel about time change?
Time change. Ever since I was, I think, in grade school, it has always been a pain to me because the time loss section of it, or wherever it is, you lose an hour of sleep, you get less sleep, just did not weigh like the pros and cons of getting an extra hour of sleep this one time does not equal me being extra tired later. Because, like, in my brain, I will take full advantage of the time change. Like, I'm going to stay up an hour, even if I know, no, I shouldn't do that. I'm gonna. Like, either way, I'm not going to be able to fall asleep, like, when I should. And I'm really feeling the weight of the time zone change in Washington, especially,
it's dark.
because I woke up this Sunday and completely forgot it was the time zone. Phones did it automatically. But I woke up and I was like, weird, the sun's still up. Like normally, like last week, I woke up early and it was pitch black dark and I was getting ready for church. This Sunday, woke up and it was bright out. I was like, weird. I was like, oh yeah, there's a time zone change. And then I remembered, oh yeah, at 5 o'clock, it's going to be dark. Like, I'm not a morning person to appreciate the nice sunny weather in the morning. Like, I need it to be brighter in the later part of the day, not the earlier part of the day.
So your sunsets aren't at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
So we're like, I'm not coming to work and it's dark and leaving dark.
Yep.
Like, yeah, it's just, it does not, I feel no benefit or gain from it whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's just annoying because I know I'll be super tired in the Lenten season, whenever we lose an hour of sleep.
Spring is how most people describe that. time
Oh
of the
yeah,
year.
that.
But yeah, Lenten season.
Lent.
You're so pious, Shane. Shane's life is marked by the liturgical, historic
Yes.
Christian calendar.
Yeah, because the spring here is the same temperature as fall, and anyway,
Yeah.
there's no difference.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah. All right. You now.
Yeah. Lows, highs. Some of them are really tied together. So Charlotte and I went over to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho this last weekend for a marriage retreat, a little marriage conference. And so the lows associated with that, the lows and highs are swirling together. So we got to worship at the congregation where I served for 5 years for a beautiful service. So one of the lows connected to that is we only got to go to one service, and so there were so many people I didn't get to see that I would have loved to have seen. And some great people, even some listeners of the show. Heather, I thought about texting you. You know, Charlotte and I wanted to connect, but we just didn't have time. So some people are like, hey, if you're in town, we'd love to get a coffee. I know you're busy. And I just didn't. And I suppose I could have, but everything's a choice with time. So we didn't really have the time in the schedule, and we didn't make the time. So kind of that regret of, there's more people I wish I could have seen. And the other low was, and it was as high as well, but the service we went to this last weekend for many Christian churches celebrated All Saints Day. And All Saints Day is a time where you remember those who've died in the faith in general, but usually in the last year or so. And so it was a sad evening. It's the first All Saints Day since my mom died. And so kind of starting the service in tears already, because I wasn't really thinking about that. Like, go to church, this will be fun. We'll see our old friends. And then we started singing for all the saints. And at one point, even the service, Charlotte said, I'm not crying, you're crying. And at one point, she very subtly handed me tissues. So that was sad and beautiful. And also in the roll call, as they named a bunch of saints who died in the faith from that congregation, I'd say close to 10 of them I knew from when I was serving there. So it's just hearing those names and seeing new widows and widowers in the pews. There was a row of several people that I got to know the couple, and there were like 4 or 5 people who now no longer had their spouse, but they were friends together. So that was sad and beautiful all at once. So yeah, not enough time to see people, but at the same time, it was so beautiful to get to see the handful of people that we did see. That's a high. And then the fact that Charlotte and I were able to get away for a couple days and invest in our marriage and have time for good conversation and hard conversation and fun challenges of what does it look like to grow as a married couple. So that was definitely great high for the week. Now, time change. So we were actually in Coeur d'Alene. That's like 5-hour drive away when that was happening. So Grandma and Grandpa were watching the kids, and Charlotte was giving them instructions to say, now on Saturday, early in the morning, what you want to do is change the clocks first thing so that everybody gets acclimated. And then she said, no, that's for the springtime. So in the springtime, this is my parenting tip, change the clocks early in the morning on Saturday, because let's say the kids go to bed at 8. It's tough to convince them to go to bed at 7. But if you change the clocks early in the morning, by the time it gets to what will be 8 o'clock on Sunday evening, their brain is starting to adjust that already. So in the spring, if you have kids, change the clocks early on Saturday so that your kids will go to bed on time. And I see your face, Brenda. Let me finish my thought. But in this one, in the fall behind, you leave the clock where it is until after they go to bed, and then you change it. So then you get an extra hour to yourself.
I think that's smart.
So Brenda, you look like you had a very quizzical look on your face.
So with changing it earlier in the day, though, doesn't that throw you off if you have plans like we're going somewhere at such and such time, but now you're on you're not on the right time?
I think that speaks to the fact that we don't do a lot. Well, there are very few places where we need to be on time.
Okay.
So church is one of them. If there's a track meet, that's another one. But besides that, Saturday afternoons, we're just trying to keep the kids alive. Okay. We eat when we're hungry. Like we're not going to the theater. We don't have ballet tickets usually for the 5 of us. So
okay.
So it's all about manipulating. Yep.
So that doesn't answer though.
So this is obviously the great one. We totally are usually tempted to double spend it. Like, okay, we can stay up an hour later and we can sleep in an hour. And it's not a 2-hour time change, but we treat it like it is.
Yeah.
It is dark. That's hard now. And I agree, Shane, especially up here in Western Washington, the extra hour earlier in the morning, it's not like the sun comes up at 6. It's still, I don't know when it comes up, 7:30 or something like that.
No. Now it's setting at what, 5:30?
Yeah, 5:43 tonight is sunset. So yeah, that's dark. I don't care for it. And I haven't thought enough, and I'm not smart enough to, it's hard for me to kind of conceptualize what it would have been without the time change, because I've only ever known it with the time change.
I feel like it'd just be normal without.
And I have never looked at it, and I don't intuitively understand which one is on daylight savings or off daylight savings. Yeah. I don't know what that is. And I know Idaho, Washington, like a lot of states, has passed like internal law or proposition that we want to permanently be on or permanently off, and we're waiting for the Congress to ratify that. And if we wanted to do the other one, I think the states have authority to do it, and they don't need the federal government to approve it. But because we want to permanently stay whatever is on or off, that change needs the federal government to ratify it. But if we went the other way, we have the authority to do that.
Weird.
At least that's what I remember from a random 30-second thing I read 7 years ago. So comment below.
It's stuck.
Correct us where we're wrong. And,
I don't know.
Yeah. But I do like, with this time change, it seems easier to get up early in the morning, at least for a while, that kind of residual as your body catches up. Anyway. No, not for you.
I'm gonna say only Sunday, and then today it was rough.
It was rough.
And that's the other piece of it. Sorry,
You're allowed, Shane. Go ahead.
Being involved with church my entire life, it always falls on the Sunday, and it just, I always feel the weight of it more, because like always for every single fall back, fall forward, it's always been for church morning.
Yeah,
and I always recognize it more because it's always like I'm getting up early one way or another.
One time when I was at seminary, they assign you to what they call a fieldwork church, where you're forced labor, unpaid. And so you had to go to a church, which is appropriate. And so I was a seminarian, and usually we got there pretty early. By the time we get in the parking lot, there's a car or two. Nobody's there. That's kind of how it is now as well. But I remember one time we got to the parking lot, and the parking lot was full. And I asking Charlotte, that's weird. What are all these cars doing here? Nobody's ever here before we are. And we open the exterior doors and start walking the lobby. I'm like, who is in the church? Why are there all those people in there? Is there some emergency thing happening? And I couldn't figure it out. And that's when the senior pastor's wife goes, forget to change your clock?
Oh no.
Yep. I was halfway through the lobby and still didn't realize myself, the time change. I had no idea. I was asking Charlotte, why are these people here? I was that dense to not even recognize. So anyway,
there's always somebody.
Missed it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. There's always.
Yeah. So cool. Last thoughts on time change before we get into conversation for the day. All right. Nope. All right. Easy enough. So today's episode is just kind of checking in. In some ways, we didn't and don't have a big series planned right now. This isn't part of a 9 months mapped out of episodes, and we don't have a regular guest. We've got our friend of the show, Brenda, here. And so in some sense, there's not a particular content thing we were driving at, but we wanted to just stay connected and have conversation and check in, because that's what this show is about, is we want to have real conversation. And a lot of times real conversation doesn't have an agenda or a plan or a specific thing we're going after. But that in itself, I think, is worth a little conversation around in the time that we have today. And what I want to ask Shane and Brenda, and I'll have some thoughts and invite you, good listener, to think about, and hopefully you have some space to talk with others about, is what makes for a good check-in? What makes for a good catalyst or setting for a conversation? So I'll ask it like this. Shane, Brenda, you can get us going. Is there a good context or a helpful question that you've found to have real conversation with people? And by real conversation, I mean more than just, hey, how's it going? Okay, good. You see the game yesterday? Yep, Seahawks won. It's great. And those are fine things. But sometimes I want more, and I want to have real conversation. And my guess is other people want to have more substantive conversation. But even if both people or several people want to, it doesn't mean it's going to happen. Like, and so some contexts, like locations or times, might be more helpful. Or maybe there's questions that you've found to get conversation going. So let me just pause for a second. Brenda, Shane, have you found either contexts or certain questions more conducive or facilitating for real conversation?
I can't think of a specific question, but I guess in terms of context, I think it's helpful when there's a little bit more time. It's hard to go and have a deeper conversation with somebody when you're both kind of running past each other. Even if you do both want to, and there is that trust already, and you want to share, there isn't the time for it. And so then you don't want to go too deep into any topic because, you can't talk about it fully the way you'd want to. So there has to be some time, and I think some trust between you and the person to want to share more than just surface level stuff.
Mm-hmm. I've found as fall show production, whatnot, has been going on, seeing a lot of familiar faces and also kind of just people I don't know too well, but I know their name more or less. I've been finding it really helpful instead of just, I've never been a fan of asking like, how are you? Because I feel like we're creatures of habit and routine, and we're always going to say good or
busy, tired,
busy.
fine.
Yeah. And it's just, I don't know. It does take time to expand upon it, but I have found, not given a ton of time, just asking how, figuring what takes a person most of the time in their day, asking them, how has your job been going, has opened a lot of doors for conversation, because I feel like people are always willing to talk about what they're doing most of the day. And it's like, it's been really rough, or it's like, I've been working a lot of overtime, or it's going really well. Or, and if it's a youth or kid, like, how's school going? Like, I think people are more willing to share. I don't know. They're just more willing to share something they've been doing what they're doing all day than deeper things in their life. But it always kind of opens a door to something deeper in their life too.
So if I'm hearing you right, you found that not just how's it going, but kind of how's it going at work is able or invites people to share more than they would just kind of a generic how's it going?
Yeah, because I think, I mean, so far, when I've asked it's been a good enough question where there's never enough time to unpack, and people are always willing to expand upon it. Because I don't know, because I think it's just something that they do a lot of time, and I guess to be frank, a lot of people don't have a lot of opportunities to talk about their work, because they're probably not talking about it with other people in their work, or they might be, but or when they get home from work, they don't want to talk about work. And so I guess this, in the fall show setting, has been really good because it's outside of work. It's not like it's the end of the day or anything and you're trying to unwind. It's just this good middle ground. I don't know.
It's interesting. My experience with that question in my work hasn't been that. So, and I'm not sure if this says something about me or church workers or pastors, but for that question to go somewhere of depth in my world, I need to already have a really good relationship with them. Otherwise, it feels like it becomes kind of a too vulnerable of a question, or people start to brag. So if I'm in a group of pastors where there's not tons of trust, and you say, how's it going at church? They're going to tell you about the great things. And they're not going to tell you that they almost quit last week, or that their members aren't talking to them. Like, they're going to say, oh, well, we had 10 new members or 4 baptisms, confirmation's going great. And it feels like it's just kind of, they puff their chest out. And so if I already have a really good friendship with somebody, I think we can get to that. Like, how's it going at church? But I usually have to modify, like what's something like what's hard at church right now, or what's something that's going well. Like we're asked to say, how's ministry, how's church, like what's good, what's hard right now. I kind of have to qualify it. Otherwise, I feel like I get some inflated, my church is better than your church answer.
Yeah, I think that's a good like caveat, or like a maybe like a niche of the question. Like if you're talking to people in the same field, I think there is it can turn into a competition of the sorts.
One thing that I just remembered, I've asked 2 people this recently just as a random question, but I've asked them, what's something that happened in your day-to-day that you figured nobody would care about? Like nobody would ask you about it. You wouldn't normally share, but what's something that happened? And one of them shared something about work, something that happened at work that they were, I feel like they were proud of it. Something maybe small, but that maybe would have gone unnoticed. So they finally got to brag about it. And one other person said to me, oh, I was able to bench this much at the gym and with these weights, and like nobody was there with them. And again, I guess an opportunity to kind of be proud. I think sometimes it is hard to brag and talk about the good stuff because you don't want to come off that way. Yeah. So to say, hey, what's something that you think nobody would care about that happened today, was kind of got them thinking about something else.
I like that. That's sort of a neutral version. So I found some success, but that sounds like I have an objective. But I found some traction with usually some version of highs and lows. So, but how you said that, it's kind of a little more neutral. Like take it however you want, as opposed to being pushed into some direction. But I think other highs and lows questions I'll ask my kids or other people. What's something that made you smile today, or what's something that made you laugh? And if they say nothing, like you can grieve about that. I'm really sorry to hear that. Like, I think if you didn't smile or laugh today, that, there's heavy days and that's okay, but we can bear that together. Or similar, like what's something that was frustrating today, or anything discouraging right now. It's a hard thing. We often say, how are you? And then I've had a few friends in the past qualify that to get more. They'll sometimes follow it up with, how are you really? And isn't it crazy how much that one word changes the question entirely? Like, how are you? No, how are you really?
And then you feel seen. You're like, oh, they saw past my, I'm fine, I'm good. They know I'm not, or they really do care. Like a lot of times that's just like a polite form of conversation just to ask. So everyone just says good and fine, and then you move on. But when they ask that second question, just that adding that extra word, you're like, oh, you actually want to know. You really care. So I can take a few more minutes here and really tell you.
Yeah. I had a thought and I lost it. Oh, sorry.
If it comes in, just push that mute button on mine and we'll...
okay. All right. Say less.
I've also had some people, like there's one person, and Shane, I think you know her, Linnea. She's been one that is very good at asking about how she can pray for you. Like anybody, whether it's through text, putting it as her Instagram post, just like a blanket, hey, anybody, how can I pray for you? Or messaging you directly, how can I pray for you today? And some people I think have that gift or that really big desire to want to love people that way. But you do answer that question differently than just how are you?
Yeah, I'll second that too. I mean, because she does, the same thing for me. And it's kind of taught me to, I'm terrible at it. Definitely does not come like second nature to me or for whatever. But having just asked people like, and also, is there any way I can be praying for you? Even if we were talking about something completely else, just, it really opens the door for them for deeper conversation.
Yeah. As I hear that question, and I've got, I'd like to think I ask that question sometimes, but I've had similar good friends who that's their kind of default conversation. Shout out to Jenny Brockman on the radio here, who ask, how can I pray for you? But if I'm not there kind of with a relationship depth, that feels off-putting to me a bit. Like I feel like I could feel more guarded or back up of like, we're not that close. Like that I think that anyway, for me, kind of implies a certain level of vulnerability. which is different than if we're already talking about something and they offer to pray for that. Like, hey, can I pray for you about that? Yeah, great. Like, we're already talking about it. But if it's, hey, by the way, what can I pray for? Going back to that, if we don't have time for a substantive conversation, I'm going to give probably a pretty shallow answer. It's got a lot to be thankful for right now. Like, I'm going to give a generic, safe-guarded answer as opposed to, actually, I'm really concerned about this.
Is that because it feels like they're getting too personal because that relationship isn't there?
Yeah, that's a very sort of intimate question, I think, or it can't. That's how I hear it, which probably just speaks to me being a closed-off person as much as anything. Maybe other people don't hear it that way, but if a acquaintance or random person were to ask me that, I'm gonna give different answers than if it's like my friend Brad. We get together once a month or twice every 3 months for like a 3-hour conversation, and it's just so real and everything's on the table. If he asks that, I'm gonna give a different answer than just a random listener of the show who might be a member of this church that I see every Sunday. I don't know, just certain vulnerability there for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about context? So time is one factor. Any other factors that help you have good conversations?
I think of, again, just trust with people. And I think trust doesn't necessarily have to be built up always in a serious way. But if this is a person that you've been silly with, that you guys have joked around, or one person was real one day and had a bad day and actually broke down, and they were able to kind of get past stuff like that, then it's easier to have those conversations in the future because you've already been real with each other, whether it was silly or I guess in a more serious way too.
Yeah. For me, I think another factor is something maybe out of the ordinary. So this is with my wife especially. If we need to talk about something, or like we want to have a really kind of substantive conversation, it's probably on a date night rather than dinner at the kitchen table. And some of that's our life with 3 little monsters running around our house who are delightful children of God. Also monsters. Sometimes I feel like they're conspiring to not let us have conversation. So some of it's just away from routine or mundane. So like at a restaurant, we're more likely to have more conversation.
Yeah. I think another big piece of conversation too is at least one party in this conversation has to have a willingness to listen. Sometimes both people want to talk, and I think that just kind of leads to situations of nobody's listening. They're just duking it out in conversation almost. I think there is a big difference between like intentionally listening to somebody. Like there's plenty of times where I talk to people and I'll ask them how you're doing. How's your job doing? Knowing full well they're not going to ask, how am I doing as well? I think there's a sacrifice a lot of times in listening, because I think everybody wants to be listened to. I don't know a single person who wouldn't like to talk about themselves and how they're really doing, but there is an intentional sacrifice, I think, to listen as well. And so like you can have the best time and place, you have all the time in the world, you have the greatest setting, you're having whatever, I don't know, you're just you two in conversation, but if one person is not able to listen, you can't have that good conversation.
So you said sacrifice in the sense of, if you and I were talking and I'm trying to listen, that is the sacrifice that I don't get to share what I'm thinking?
Yeah.
Is that what you had in mind?
I mean, either share what you're thinking, or that, I mean, maybe this person just doesn't actually care what you say, but okay. they just flat out just need somebody to hear, which I've learned for now being married. Sometimes people aren't looking for an answer or solutions.
They just want to be heard. Don't fix me.
Yes.
Yeah. That may have come up 15 times at our marriage retreat this weekend.
But I think sometimes people are looking for an answer or like a solution, but I think in any way, shape, or form, if somebody's talking, they want to be heard.
I love how profound that sounds. And if somebody's talking, they probably want to be heard. But yeah, and also, so the sacrifice. To pick on that word, sacrifice. Sort of, if I'm listening well, I'm sacrificing my voice, perhaps, or my perspective. And for me, also listening well, it takes work. Like maybe sacrifice isn't the right word, but there's an exertion to listen well. Whether it's just the actual giving attention in the moment, or the empathy to like recognize what they're feeling, or maybe just I'm tired from a long day and I would rather put something mindless on, or I'm distracted and I'm tempted to grab my phone. So it's hard.
You're sacrificing time in there too by doing that. I mean, time where you could be doing those other things, even if it is unwinding, like if you're not actively doing something else, but unwinding and relaxing is a thing too. So you're giving up your time to listen to the person. I've never thought about listening as a sacrifice though. That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are times where you're listening to somebody and it's not, you're just listening. You're not thinking anything more than it. And it just all happens in the moment. But I think if you really intentionally want to have good conversations, I think there's going to be a lot of times. I've had plenty of conversations where I'm hoping somebody's going to ask, please just like ask how I'm doing, or like, and like, well, but I mean,
real. No, it's real.
Yeah. Like
that's very real. There was a time when I did that to somebody. We were on the phone and they asked me how I was doing, and I shared, and they had called me, so I figured they would just kind of jump into whatever it is they had called me for. And so there was this pause, and then they said, are you going to ask how I'm doing? And I said, yes, I'm sorry, you're right. How are you doing? And then they spilled they were not doing well, but they needed to be asked and were waiting for the question. I felt so bad. I'm like, you're right. Like sometimes you are just waiting, like, please ask me because I'm ready to share. I want to tell you how I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that's so connected to one of the things I was hoping that we'd have time for today is that the balance between something that feels spontaneous or extemporaneous or natural versus scheduled and structured. And I think in our minds, it feels more sincere if it is spontaneous and unscheduled and it just comes up. And yet there's something really I found helpful about having structured, scheduled times to have a conversation. So my wife is great. She's got several people that she has ongoing. It's a coffee date, it's a phone call, it's a walk, and it happens every single week. And it provides a space for conversation. And as a staff here at St. Luke's, I have monthly one-on-one appointments with all my direct reports. And I ask things like, what's fun or fulfilling these days? And it gives you two and others a chance to answer that. And I even say, like, you can brag about something that maybe I didn't notice that you're proud of. I want to hear it. Or the other question is, what's difficult or challenging right now? That maybe without that question being asked, you would have never brought up. And like your friend here, like, I need you to ask me this question because I have something to say. And he or she didn't feel like they could offer that without the question inviting it.
Right.
That's kind of what it heard anyway. Yeah. So this is actually one of our big takeaways from our marriage retreat this weekend is we need to figure out a more intentional way to check in and ask the questions that invite the other person to share. And it's weird. Like we've been married 17 years. And as we were talking about what that would look like in our marriage, I said, Charlotte, I do this with my staff every month or like every week. I'm meeting with one or two staff members every single week, doing the very thing that my wife is saying, could we please do something like this? Like, what would it look like if we did this? And I was like, oh, I know how to do that. I do that all the time. And she said, come on, like, jeez. And so I emailed her, a copy of what I do with my staff every week. And I was like, maybe something like this. And she's like, yeah. So we're figuring out what that routine looks like and how frequent and what time of day is going to make sense. But maybe I could just share these questions on the podcast here, and I'll pause after each one if you two want to say anything. Is that okay? We're just making this up as we go.
Sure.
So I shared a couple earlier. So the first one is always, what's fun or fulfilling these days? Does that invite anything from you? Like, is that question helpful, or is there a better way to ask that question? If it was your spouse or a friend or a supervisor.
Sorry, because when I hear these questions, I immediately think of our one-on-one meetings. But you're saying asking these questions, if it's just a random or like a...
Let's say you and Lauren said, you know what? I feel like we're not talking as much because we're so busy right now. What if we had an hour every Saturday morning? What would be the kinds of question? Would these questions, I'm trying to give our listeners some examples of, like, they can rewind and write that down of, oh yeah, that would be helpful. Is that question, what's fun or fulfilling right now for you? Would that give voice to something you're feeling? Would that help Lauren maybe speak into something that she wouldn't have brought up otherwise? Brenda, you and Adam as well.
Yeah. It makes me, like, if I'm thinking of it, I'm going to think of it this way, as if Adam were asking me these questions, like, how would I want him to ask me these things? That would,
what's going well? What are you proud of?
Yes. It'd be like, what made you happy this week? Like, what's something that made you smile? Or, like, a more personal question for me, like, what gave you the feels? Like, all the good feels.
What gave
like,
you the good feels this week?
Yeah.
Shane, is there a way that would help you share the positive things in your life if Lauren asks, instead of just like, hey, what are your highs from the week? Like that feels a little bit more removed than...
Yeah. I would definitely say, like, if Lauren and I were having that conversation and they ask, like, what is fun or fulfilling, it'd be I feel like we could spend probably hours just on that question alone, just because it's like what is fulfilling? Like, well, okay, that's that's a rabbit hole, but like, and in a good way. And I think it would lead to other conversation, which would be good.
And I don't want to read into what you said, but you said it kind of in this conditional clause of, if she would ask that, or if you two would have that question, you would be able to talk for hours, which is sort of, I'm filling in the blanks in my head, sort of implying for all of us, we're not having that conversation. We're not talking for hours about the things we would probably love to talk about. Right? I mean, is that true?
Yeah, I mean, it is.
And so I'm trying to kind of peel back the layers to say, okay, if there are things we would be happy to talk about or would be satisfied in talking about for a while, but we're not, are there things that we can do or put in place to help us get there? And so I'm kind of throwing out the idea of weekly and monthly check-in. Here are some questions that you might take them out of order. You might pull one out of a hat. You might just go down the line. So the first one is, what's fun, fulfilling, what gives you the good feels? Second one, sort of the low side. What's difficult right now? What's challenging? Maybe what's frustrating for you? Is there a way to help either of you speak to maybe the more negative side of things or difficult side of things?
What was stressful today? What was something that stressed you out?
Yeah, and I think that could be, maybe depending on who you're talking to, could be stuff relating to their work or just stuff relating to your relationship too.
Yeah.
I think
I've had, like, sometimes I'll ask Adam, we ask each other, like, how was your day? And so many times his day is busy. Like, that's what I hear from him the most. Like, it was hard, it was rough, it was busy. So what I've started to do is ask, like, what was hard? Like, asking right up front for the specific rather than just a general, like, how was it? Because I already know the answer I'm going to get if I ask it a certain way.
Yeah.
So I'll ask, what part was frustrating? Because then he'll go into detail, and maybe, I think part of it, he thinks I won't understand parts of his job, or he doesn't want to think about work for that much. But I want to show that I care. Like, maybe I won't know exactly the context and situation because I'm not there with him in person, but I do care and want to know what it is that's stressing him out.
I wonder if even phrasing it differently would be helpful. So instead of because as you said those questions to Adam, it made me think about asking my kids, how was school? Fine. Like, more questions isn't going to help. Like, follow-up questions that I intend to show interest just feels like I'm barraging them with more questions. So I wonder whether it's friends or spouse to even just say something like, I'd love to hear about, and then fill in that. Like, I'd love to hear about what was frustrating today. That's kind of an I statement rather than what was frustrating today, or how was work, or what was difficult. I really care about what was difficult in your work day. I wonder if that, I don't know, just trying stuff out here, making up as we go here. Like if that feels different of, I really care about what gives you joy this week, rather than what are 3 things that made you happy this week, or what was something that was joyful this week, as opposed to, because the real point is I care. The real point isn't necessarily getting a list, but I want you to know that I care about what made you happy this week. And then the hard part, which doesn't translate well to podcast or radio, is to just be quiet for a minute. They might need 30 seconds to speak about it, which it's hard to model as people are listening, because they will wonder, did it stop? And then they're texting while they drive, and it's not safe. Yeah. So what's fun and fulfilling, or I'd love to hear about what's fun and fulfilling, what's difficult, challenging. The next one I asked my staff is, what are the 2 biggest like end goals or targets or outcomes you're working towards right now, which doesn't really necessarily translate to friends or family, but maybe something like, I'd love to hear about what's on your mind, or what are the things you're thinking a lot about, or is there anything kind of distracting you right now? Because it could be a good thing or a bad thing, but in work life, there's usually something that's an emphasis. But in just personal life, it seems like there's usually, like, if I don't know how to ask that question. It's a weird one, but it's sort of what are you ruminating on or pondering? Pastor Aaron said the word pondering quite what's something that it's sort of in the front of your mind or in the back of your mind, or you can't quite get it out of your mind.
Or just a goal that you're working toward. Like,
wait, what's something you're working towards?
Yeah.
You care about right now?
Right. Something that you're working toward that maybe you can help support, whether it is somebody you're married to, or just a friend. Like, there could be a friend that said, in November, I am not going to spend any money on new clothes. And so then they're talking about that. How can I support you? Maybe I will hang out with you. We won't go to the mall. We won't go to Target again. We'll do something else.
So even I'm trying to do a lot of things here. What does this look like as a family, as friends? So something even like, Shane, you brought up, asking, instead of how are you at work right now, or what's going well at work. But I wonder if the idea of goals of, hey, what are you working towards right now? Like any personal goals, or professional goals. Although even as I say that, it sounds convicting. Like, well, I want to exercise more. I want to lose weight. I want to do this. I want to learn Spanish. But that's typically not my heart in asking the question. But most people are probably working towards stuff, right? Like, people have goals. I don't even know what most of them are, but I care. So I'm trying to, how do you ask that in a way that lets them know you can? I'd love to hear about anything that you're kind of working towards right now.
Yeah. But I think but also simply just like, I don't know, like, what are you looking forward to? Because I mean, like, you could either be working towards something, or you could just be waiting for something. Like, oh, I'm so excited. There's this band concert, I don't know, coming, and I've been looking forward to this for so long. And that could just always been on the back of your mind for a good chunk of time, or just really looking forward to something. I don't know.
Yeah. So what are you looking forward to? I'd be curious to hear what you're looking forward to.
And that could be something you're literally working towards, or something you're just waiting for. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then one of the last ones for my monthly check-ins with each of my staff is something along the lines of, where or how can I better support you? And each of these translates different to different relationships. But when I ask that question, I try to load it so that it's not, can I better support you? But to have the assumption built in, I can better support you, but I don't know how. And I have a blind spot here, and I need you to speak into that. So where can I better support you, or how can I better support you? Which maybe that's clunky language, but I bet that would translate to spouse and friends.
And I feel like this question might be kind of exclusive for that, or is like,
it's not a generic, like in the lobby at the movie theater or at church.
Yeah, like you're getting to know someone, like, and you're like, how can I like better support you? Like, I don't know. Like, Yes or no. I don't like.
So assuming a certain level of intimacy and depth of relationship.
Yeah.
My guess is both of your spouses, for example, and mine included, would love for us to ask that question. Mm-hmm. Adam, how can I better support you right now? Lauren, how can I better support you? Mm-hmm. Charlotte, how can I better support you? Like, I bet it wouldn't take them too much work to come up with a significant answer that you probably can do and would want to do, but don't know. Mm-hmm. Or you forgot how significant. Oh, you have said that before. I forgot that it's something that really matters. Mm-hmm. I don't know. For myself, like I would love it if people ask me that, whether it's, employees or board members or spouse, like, hey, Pastor Dan, how can I support you? Oh, like, wow. Thanks for asking. Like, that's a great question.
Yeah. And I think that's just one of those questions that helps you feel seen. Or like the person having it been asked helps them feel seen and noticed.
So it speaks to the kind of the value of the person.
They don't even have to have the answer for that, but I think just asking that tells them that I care for you as an individual person.
I think that helps with expectations too. It makes me think, like earlier you said, learning to listen better, and sometimes the other person doesn't want you to come up with a solution. They just wanted you to listen. But also there are times when they didn't want you to just listen. They wanted you to speak up, like, don't you care? Please help me with this. But when you're on the receiving, listening end, it's hard to tell what the person is wanting unless you ask or unless they say that. So how to better support you, like, all right, in this time, this is kind of what I'm looking for. I'd really like you to just listen to me vent. Like, I just need to get this out. I don't need a solution. I'll figure that out. I just want to get it all out of my system. Mm-hmm. Or actually, I don't really know what to do about this. I'm going to vent, but I really need you to ask me questions, help brainstorm with me, what to do here.
Yeah. So as somebody's maybe sharing and you're on the listening end, to stop listening for a second and ask, hey, how can I best support you in this right now? Mm-hmm. And you could even give, I tend to, this is probably really annoying, I give people options as if it's exclusive. So right now, would you like me to just sort of listen and affirm, or do you want me to help brainstorm solutions? And I often do that as if those are the two options, and there's probably other ones. But Brenda, if I'm hearing you right, that's kind of what you're saying of, to be a good listener might involve asking a question of, how can I love you, support you in this? Do you have something in mind? Maybe just leave it there open-ended. Or do you want me to be listening now? Do you want me to be kind of pushing back and being like truth sayer? Do you want to brainstorm solutions? I really want to support you in this. How can I do that?
Yeah, I think that would and does help avoid frustrations of I didn't get what I wanted out of this conversation, or what I was hoping, the support I was hoping to get from that person, if you just kind of lay out those expectations at the beginning or during the conversation. Because
they might have an idea. I just want you to listen. Or I'm stuck and I need solutions. Or they might even say, I don't actually know. We'll just see where it goes.
Yeah, that too.
Because that was one of our conversations this week was, I'm not usually lacking ideas. But sometimes I am, and I certainly have blind spots, but usually I have too many ideas. And so if I'm sharing a frustration, it's typically not because I want help troubleshooting some possible solutions. But yeah, so to be able to ask, how can I support you in this? And if you're being asked that question, you might already have an answer. You might not have an answer and say, I don't know. Or, and I think just to give permission to our listeners, it's okay to say, I just want you to listen. I bet that would solve a lot of frustrations in conversations. Just to ask, how can I be a good conversation partner in this? And to tell that person what you want from them. Oh,
it's very caring. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very caring. Mm-hmm. And yet it takes intentionality. And kind of like what I was saying earlier, scheduling a time to ask these questions feels formal, as if it doesn't feel sincere. It feels so structured it could be cold. But my experience is that's not actually what happens. It provides the structure for it to flourish. So similarly, asking some of these active listening questions, for me, I'd speak for Dan here, at first it feels so wooden and formal, like I'm doing an exercise in class. Like, okay, here's a listening class. I want you to say this back, and then you just say it back. And it feels artificial at first. But as I keep trying to grow as a listener, I realize, oh, it works. Like, not just in the sense of like I'm tricking the other person into thinking I'm caring, but I'm actually like caring better. I don't know. Mm-hmm. It almost feels like training wheels, but like doing this rigid thing that feels hyper structured actually really does serve what we want, what I want it to most of the time.
I'm glad there's room for both. Like that there's room for those structured conversations that provide that space, but also the spontaneous, that there's both of those. Yeah.
So this is just my very limited perspective, which says more about me than any perception of reality. But my take on all this is our default priority is we think spontaneous is better. And so that's assumption number one is we think spontaneous feels better, is more sincere. My second assumption is none of us are talking and being heard as much as we would like. And we're not necessarily seeing the disconnect there. That maybe we could actually be heard and share more if we let go of that first priority of it should just be easy. Well, maybe it's not. And you might actually have to do some formal work to create a context to share and be heard. But I think again, this is just my perception, but I think we so value spontaneous, we're willing to sacrifice being heard and listening. Anyway, that's my maybe pessimistic observation today, is that we hold on to the one at the expense of the other. Mm-hmm. And I'm just suggesting, what if you have a monthly or weekly coffee or walk or bike ride or check-in, even when you don't feel like it, and maybe even have some prepared questions on or structured conversation on both sides that helps make it more natural. And maybe half our listeners are going, Weber is really guarded and insecure and doesn't share much. We all do this naturally, in which case, good for you. That's awesome. Like, I celebrate that. It's hard for me. That's, I guess, all I'm trying to say is this is really hard for me to listen well and to share freely. I don't do that naturally, and so I have to work at it. That's my self-discovery for the day.
Hey, we see you. We see you trying.
We see you trying. Yeah. So listeners, viewers, I hope this has invited you to see other people. We've said it in a variety of ways. I like how you said that, Brenda. Like, I see you, or we care. We want to be heard, Shane. I love that emphasis on everyone wants to be heard. Yeah. The people around you, good listener, want to be heard, and you deserve to be heard. And that might take an awkward call or text or email of, can we get a coffee sometime? I'd love to share. Or maybe you're just the giver in this first point of, I'd love to get a coffee or a beer sometime. I want to hear how you are. And most likely, if it's a decent person and you give them enough space, they might ask back. Or like Brenda's friend, you can just say, also, I would love to share how I am. Which feels super scary and vulnerable, but might be really, really important to do. So find a conversation partner. If you don't have one, show up here on a Sunday morning to St. Luke's. I'll introduce you to some good people. Shane, final thoughts?
Honestly, too many thoughts.
Okay.
Somewhere in that conversation, a lot of branching thoughts, and just too many to wrangle at this point.
I see your wheels turning, and we don't have time in the episode, but I care. I see you, and I care, and I'd like to hear more after the show is over.
Yeah. So I guess this is just making me think about probably too philosophically on like conversation and what is conversation and whatnot. So
that is not for today.
Yeah, exactly.
Brenda, any takeaways from today's conversation?
Yeah, I definitely want to implement some of the stuff with Adam. Like, all right, we should find a time, even if it's not every week, at least once or twice a month, where we're getting away out of our routine and let's talk about some of these. I kind of like having these questions in a hat. That's kind of a fun idea. Like, let's pull one out. Then there's less pressure of, here you go, Adam, here's a page long thing of questions to talk about with your wife. But like, here's one that we can share. Yeah.
So cool. I often joke about comment below, but I really do care. If anybody listening to this has things that have worked, that we didn't talk about, I'm looking for more strategies to be able to share and listen better. Times of day, for me specifically, kids are a challenge. As much as I love them, they make life complicated. So if you have kids or have survived kids, I'd love to know how that's worked. If you live in the Seattle-Tacoma area and you want to watch my children for me so my wife and I can go out, please give us a call or email here at 2414 because I want to talk to my bride more. So that's real. So, all right, time for a candy corn break. Thank you for listening. Thanks for watching. We will catch you next time, 2414. Adios.
Ooh.
That's the end of the episode, but we want to continue the conversation. Continue the conversation by sharing this episode, subscribing, or leaving a review. Connect with us on Instagram at 2414 podcast. Connect with us through email at 2414@stlukes-church.com. Or best of all, keep the conversation going by inviting someone to process with you so that you can each walk away with more understanding that leads to more conversation as the journey continues. If you happen to be in the Seattle-Tacoma area of Washington, stop by on a Sunday morning and say hi. 2414 is a podcast produced by St. Luke's Lutheran Church in Federal Way, Washington. To find more content, discover upcoming opportunities to connect in person, or to support the show, head on over to stlukes-church.com. Thanks for walking with us.